talk a little bit about the phases and some registrations for some of the competitions that we're going to be offering, as well as some save the dates. So we'll get into it. I have invited, as many of you know, I used to be close to the Madison group, and my son's an athlete there, and they started practicing golf this past weekend. So I've asked Kate Essex, who's one of their coaches, and she was going to, I think, talk to a couple of the other coaches maybe about giving us kind of a rundown of how their first practice went with screening and participation. So Kate, you want to, I think you can unmute yourself.
I found it. Yes.
There you are.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's so good to see so many faces. This is wonderful. Thank you, Special Olympics Wisconsin, for return to play. I'm on a task force at work for return to work, and I thought return to work was ridiculous. Return to play, heads up, kudos everybody.
Right.
So West Madison, we started our golf season finally. I can't tell, Allison's in the background going woo woo. I can't tell you how many athletes have been calling us, because we generally start practicing in April. And so they have been chomping at the bit to get out on the course. So we were very excited. The first tip I'd offer, you have to be organized, just no doubt about it. And it takes a team. So we actually had a dedicated screener, which worked great. So you showed up at the golf course, everybody was well prepped ahead of time. Chad, and I'm not sure if Chad's on the phone tonight, tried to get a hold of him. Made sure everybody had all the education they needed ahead of time, stay the way 6 feet, wear your face coverings, et cetera, et cetera. It went very well. Everybody was very cooperative, very excited about that. And we got teed off on time, and we kept up with play, and it worked super well. But it did take a team, and I highly recommend a dedicated screener, so that person's responsibility is only to do the screening, handling the paperwork, asking the questions, taking the temperature. It takes another individual to confirm everybody stays 6 feet social distancing. Lots of reminders going on for that. And then, of course, we tee off in groups of 4. So we have a lot of unified partners for our golf team. And so unified partners, I know I was often reminding the athletes, you can't take the pin out. They're so used to taking the flag out. Can't do that. Don't pick up anything. Stay 6 feet apart. Don't forget. So, but it went phenomenally well. So I really appreciate all the guidance from the Special Olympic Office, and yeah, kudos. It's great to be back.
Yeah, one of the things I know that Kate and we talked about, and was one of your worries, was what do you do if an athlete shows up and then they don't pass the screening, right? And so we all know that the athletes, some of them, they've got staff bringing them, others are taking a bus, others, are just getting dropped off by a cab company. And if you only have, your 2 coaches, your 2 to, your 1 to 4 chaperone ratio, chaperone athlete. Now, if somebody can't participate, what do you do with them, right? You can't just say go home and leave them there. So the idea with Kate was having a designated screener, so that way if somebody did, they could stay with that person, while then eventually the coaches and the athletes could go off to practice. So that was, I think, a good idea.
Correct, and it worked well. And so, of course, we have a unified partner that always was in the last tee off group. Well, basically we have a unified partner in every group. So for instance, if we had to get an athlete to stay behind and didn't have a screener, we have a deal. Well, I'll stay behind and Jared will go out golfing by himself. So I think we'll be okay if somebody doesn't pass screening, but thank goodness everybody did. We also talked about phoning ahead of time before they even leave the house, like Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, call everybody. Hey, are you feeling well today? That way we could stop them in advance of practice. They don't have to show up and worry about it. But we were fortunate, and everybody passed screening. So,
and I think one of the reasons why we're wanted to start with the 10 and under is because, as you mentioned it, you're learning the process, and so it's much easier to learn that process. And albeit even probably easier with golf where you have unified partners, so you didn't have 8 athletes.
Correct.
But to kind of learn these systems with a low number of athletes and coaches. And then Jason will talk a little bit later about petitioning to move on to higher counts. But yeah, very good. Does anybody have any questions for Kate?
Allison had one. No, I'm just teasing. She did.
Yeah, my question is, when's book club starting? Oh, that's not Special Olympics.
Oh, believe me, we wish we could get started again. Believe me, we do.
I've got an idea. Give me a call this weekend.
All right, we'll do.
All right. Thank you, Kate. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
And then the next thing was we wanted to find out if there's anybody else on the meeting tonight that has started that would like to practice, or I guess this is fine now. If there's just something on your mind right this second about going back and starting that you want to ask, we can probably take those questions now too. We have so many people here, I can't see everybody at one time. So either use the raise the hand feature. I always can be waving at the.
Claudia, I know Tyler reached out to me and said that he wanted to say something during this time. So if you want to, I think I see him there.
If you can see me now.
Yep.
Okay. And then as I mentioned about that thing about with Ken, this was one of the shirts that they got when they went to World Games from their team. And it shows Wisconsin. So I'll make sure to get this out to the staff as soon as possible. But our golfing has been good. The county courses in Milwaukee, they actually do thermal imaging when you walk in. So even before you hit the counter, they'll actually tell you, hey, we can't let you practice. So that works out really well for us.
Very good. Okay.
I do have, Don?
Yep.
Nicole had sent emails to Sharon Klug, my acquaintance manager for the registration forms for golf. She said she did not receive them yet, and our golf coach did not receive them yet either.
I haven't sent them to your golf coach yet, Sharon. I can do that tomorrow. We still have a little bit before registration, and Jason will actually talk a little bit about that when he speaks as well. So we'll make sure you get that in plenty of time.
All right, thanks, Nicole.
And that was Claudia, right? Hiding behind that mask?
Yes, it's me. Well, I'm over at Sharon's house using her computer, and we're not 6 feet apart, so I'm using the mask.
Yeah, very good.
In the chat, Dan said that from Reedsburg, they're starting their first bowling practice tomorrow evening.
Nice.
Looks like we have a question from Shirley. My daughter Amber and I have started cornhole. We are doing it with another mother-daughter team as unified partners. We are wondering how many games in total we need to submit scores for.
So do you want to wait till the registration section, Jason, or do you want to, or our cornhole experts want to talk?
I would say, Carla, do you want to chime in?
Sure. What we're doing is we're calling it chat, which is cornhole assessment test. So it's going to be an assessment test just like you do for bocce. So you would do, each partner and each athlete would throw it 3 times, get your scores, you write them down, and then if you have only 2 on a team, or if you have 3, because we're allowing to have a substitute if you need, and then you submit those scores. So it's not scores for a game, it's the assessment test.
And all that information is available on if you go to the Special Olympics Wisconsin website, we have a special COVID-19 section, and you can find all that information there. Another question was, when are the rules coming out for volleyball skills? Amber, those should be on there too, right? Or that you still working on the?
We're still working on it. We get that September 1st deadline, so anytime after that.
Yeah, she's reminding me of the deadline I gave them. Yeah. So because we focused on outdoor first, we wanted to get those up and running for everybody, and then the next deadline is September 1st for getting all the rules for the outdoors. So if there's something specific, you can go ahead and call one of us or call your region, and they can figure out some of the answers. But we're still working on some of those things. So And then can somebody tell me when bowling and volleyball starts for Madison? Oh, well, Madison West. Well, I see one of the bowling coaches on, Brenda. You know who
Yeah.
Hannah is?
Well, we haven't officially set a date because West Madison typically has more than 10 people.
Yeah.
And so until we're in phase 2, which I don't know how long that is, it's going to be difficult to arrange bowling. I have set with the bowling alley the dates that are on the Special Olympic website of October 19th. The week of the 19th is when we should be started by then. But I'd like to start earlier. But
Okay. Brenda, that's an excellent segue. And I swear I didn't pay you for that one because Jason
no, you didn't.
and start to talk about some of the different phases and then jump into registrations after that. So Jason, the floor is yours.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen here. So I guess I'll put this out. These, with everything in the rules, updated rules and events that we're offering, I know it can get a little confusing. So I really want to try to make this as easy as possible, as well as, and then provide some time for people to ask some questions. So I'm gonna pull up my document here so I can go along with it with everybody else. So, so the return to play phasing that we're working at, this is the way we're working on. So there's a couple of things I want to remind people that we're doing this in a way, because we want to make this as safe of a process as possible. And I would say that we're at a point where we're ready to start getting petitions for phase 2. And that's mainly because we wanted people to be in phase 1 for a little bit to test out the protocols and go through all that stuff. And then before we got to phase 2 where we got more people involved. So agencies, so there's some just key factors in this. Agencies have to be in each phase for at least 2 weeks prior to requesting to move to the next phase. I will tell you, I don't think I see a way where we're going to be ready to advance people to phase 3 here in a couple weeks after, somebody wants to go to phase 2 and they get into phase 3. It's really going to be dependent on a couple different factors there. Agencies will request to move to the next phase by sport. And the reason why we're doing that is since each sport is set up differently. So I know there's a lot of golf programs that have small numbers, and moving to phase 2 allows them to participate in more of like an in-person event. Then maybe they would need to have the ability to get to a size of 50 people at a practice. So that's what we said by each sport. But to make things easier too, if you're participating in multiple sports in a sports season, you can do like a bulk proposal to say we'd like to move all our outdoor sports into phase 2, and then we would just need information about each of the sports that you're choosing to offer in that. So, and the big part about that is we're not going to do it for all sports for both outdoor and indoor, since indoor sports are a little, activities are a little bit different than outdoor activities. And so we want to keep those separate. It doesn't mean that if you're starting bowling this week and you go 2 weeks and bowling, our indoor season's not for a little while, that you couldn't propose to get to phase 2 before you get there. It might be a smart idea to do that. So you can test out your facility, test out your procedures, and do all those things. But we just keep those separate from a proposal for the outdoor season. Another point, agencies have to adhere to any of the local ordinances on top of this. So the big example right now is Dane County has a max capacity for groups at 25 participants. Our phase 2 goes up to 50. But if you're in Dane County, you would still have to follow the Dane County ordinance. So you would max out at 25 participants. And then the other part is, if anything changes with COVID-19 as far as conditions around the state, a spike in numbers or something that we deem that would be a little bit that makes it more dangerous for us to be participating, we can move agencies either in individual areas or everybody back to back phases, including back to phase 0, which is all virtual. Which we really hope we don't have to get to that point. But I do want to make people aware that just because you're in phase 2 now doesn't mean if something drastically changes in the area that we wouldn't think it's safe to still be at that level, that we would have to be able to go backwards if we need to. Hopefully we're anticipating that we're only moving forward on some of these things, but I just want to make that very clear. So how does one propose to get moved into the next phase? So the first step is an agency representative, agency manager, coach would email their local athletic director to propose moving either the sport or the sports season to the next phase. And I will be sending this out so you have this information. So we'll send this out with that, and we'll also post it on the webpage. But the questions that we're going to ask is, when did you start practicing? Where do you practice? Describe how you do your athlete screening and check-in process. How are you currently, how are current phase protocols being followed? Why would you like to move to the next phase? Because that could be different by agency. Some people might want to, like my example for golfers, it may not be to get more people, but it may be to get to the next phase for competition. And then what changes are you planning on making to accommodate the next phase? And I guess as an example for that, it may not be something that you're doing, may not be doing something, because obviously you move to the next phase, things kind of, the restrictions kind of get a little easier. So it may just say, hey, by us moving into our next phase, we're able to go down from 3 screening stations down to 1 screening station and accommodate things a little bit easier, so we can spread people out a little bit. And that's just good information for us to know. Some other questions we might be asking, we would like to ask is, what has worked for you during your current phase? We want to be able to create some best practices in case people have questions about what they're doing with their phasing. And then what challenges have you faced during your current phase? Because I do know that this is a new process, and obviously there's some things that you may have planned for that may have gone differently than you want to. And like, again, this is more best practices. All of this stuff is designed for us to come up with safe decisions. It's not for us to try to penalize people. It's more what, like I said, we're trying to work with everybody on this. And so by getting these answers, it will help us make sure we're on the same page and that we can keep moving forward with this. So once we get these questions proposed, the proposal from an agency, the local athletic director, as well as at least a group of 3 Special Olympics staff members, will review the proposal. They'll look at your proposal, and then we have a couple of key points of information that we're also looking at. The Department of Health Services activity chart tells kind of what's safe for a certain number of numbers at events. County health information, as well as a risk chart that we have that we're using. All of this stuff is public health information that we're just going to use to help make better, safe decisions on things. And that way it's not just purely based on how we feel. And that's why we also have people outside of the local athletic director that's weighing in on this. So the committee is going to respond back within 2 business days with one of the following answers: that you're approved and you're okay to move on to the next phase, that you're approved to move on to the next phase with some recommended modifications to your plan, or that you're denied to move on to the next phase with reasons and or modifications to your current plan. And so, like I said, there may be a point where you're saying, hey, we'd like to move to phase 3, and as an organization, we're not ready to hit phase 3, and that may just be simply the answer. But if there might be some things where we're like, where some of the protocols from the previous phase weren't followed, and we'd like you to try to make sure those are followed before we move you to the next phase. So that's our plan for phasing. And like I said, we want to be get this done as quickly as possible, so people aren't waiting to decide what they do with their practices. That's why we're going to commit to trying to get it done in the 2 business days for people to get an answer. Hopefully we can get something done sooner than later, but we want to make sure that's why we don't have a designated committee. The committee is kind of a rotating staff along with the individual athletic director on that. And if the individual athletic director is unable to do that, if they're off or there's something else, we would find a way to coordinate that outside of that as well. So so that's our phase. That's the phase plan that we have currently set up. So before we move on to registrations, I was going to open it up for people to ask any questions if they have some, or if they need any clarification on that. So if anybody have any questions, feel free to, Claudia, go ahead.
Well, one thing for bocce, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, for bocce, you can only have like a 1-person team or a 2-person team, not 4-person. And if they do, I mean, do we do I read the rules, but it's just like, you do like the skills, and then you just turn in the assessments just for that team, and then do they play regular games afterwards?
I can go touch on that a little bit. I don't know if one of the bocce SRT members wants to chime in as well. But the plan would be for, depending on your phasing. So phase 1, you would be participating mainly within your agency, and phase 2, we can start to spread out to get competition against maybe scheduling some games against another agency. And then I think phase 3, we'd look at maybe some more like localized competitions with multiple agencies. But again, like that's going to kind of be a little bit longer off in the future. So the idea is to hopefully we get to a point where you could play games against another agency in your area. So Amber's nodding her head. So did I get anything wrong there? All right.
So basically they can play like if we have a 2-person team and say we got 2 teams.
Yep.
So actually in reality, we would have more than that because they can only go 2 each. So they could play against each other. So I guess my reasoning, I realize we're not in the right phase form, but for like the registration forms that are going to be out there, do they have it where, I mean, is this just like for fun? Is this competition, or do we do the assessment with all of them?
So you would do the assessment with all the athletes that are planning to participate. Actually, Amber, or if you want to unmute yourself, you want to touch base a little bit about maybe how we're rewarding that. If we get agencies to participate against each other.
I mean, can they play against each other?
Yes,
to start off with, yes.
Yes, they can play against each other. They need to get the BOSAT done first, though. That's our first phase. And then from there, you can turn in registrations with when they're competing against other teammates.
Okay, so are the registration forms out yet, or are you still in the progress of making?
No, they should be out.
So then we'll get to that with registrations too right now. So so
Okay.
they are created, but they're not posted right now, and I'll get to the reason why right now. Once we get past questions on phasing, the registration piece is the next piece.
And I guess I'll throw out there, Claudia, and for everybody, during this whole process, safety has always been the most important thing. And we've struggled with how do we do that in an environment where there's different opinions among everybody. And we have an athlete population that falls in the high risk category and all these things. And so the team has really been able to create various options. So no matter what phase we're in, there's different options for some sort of competition. That competition could be just sending in BOSAT scores, and we create some kind of divisioning and do like a virtual thing like that, to where we're trying to do stuff in person. In person could be a small gathering of a few agencies if we're in phase 2. It could look like what golf, I think we're furthest along with golf. We're feeling very comfortable in the numbers of being able to hold something for 30 people, say, where we rotate the numbers coming through. We don't do awards as we typically would do, but there'll also be an option for somebody to do something in their backyard, or if somebody wants to just go to their own golf course and golf and turn in scores. So we're trying to create, because each sport is unique, we're trying to figure out these things for all those different sports. And so honestly, will we ever get out of phase 2 with more than 50 people? There's a good chance that won't happen. And so what does that look like? That's why we've been trying to be so diligent about finding out what everybody wants to do and who's going to practice, because if people tell us, I'll use punt, pass, and kick. The intent to play came back and there was 100 some people that wanted to do that. Well, now that we've gone back and said, okay, who's actually practicing, who's planning on practicing, the numbers might turn out to be 30, right? And so if that's the case, in October, we might be able to have a true competition for them. But if the numbers were 75, I mean, we're having philosophical conversations right now about, are we comfortable with that? If not, if we had numbers like that, is there a way, and we say we can't get out of phase 2, which is 50, do we do it like a morning, afternoon, or do we do a Saturday, Sunday to keep the numbers where? So this has been like recreating Special Olympics on the fly. And again, hats off to the sports team for what they've been able to accomplish. And we're still working out some of the kinks on some of these things. And I will use this opportunity, and I know my staff are probably going, shut up, Don, to just say thank you to all the agencies and the coaches, because for the most part, you guys have been just incredible to work with as we've kind of been trying to figure this all out. So, all right, now I'll shut up. Mute.
I have one other question.
Sure.
The one for the flag football.
Yep.
Where the kick and pass are, for the scoring, they're both the same? Are they supposed to both be the same as far as measurement wise?
Yeah, real quick, the for punt, pass, and kick, it's pretty. So and we can go in a little bit more details on rules for that if you have questions. I guess maybe we could do that later on. But essentially, so the process is the same for all three events. You're throwing from a line, you're punting from a line, or you're kicking from a tee from a line. And so your distance is going to be, your distance scoring is going to be the same for each of those events. It's just the different events is how you're getting the ball towards the target in the field, or towards for distance.
My coach also, we were just like where it says like the starting point, like if it's at 60 feet, but if it's outside, then it goes down to 45 feet. Does that mean you have to get it in that 3-foot line?
Yeah.
Kind of like the turbo jab?
So if you get it, yeah, so there's a 3-foot lane that goes straight out. And so because it's supposed to measure not only distance, but also accuracy. So if the ball lands in that 3-foot lane and anywhere in that lane, you would not subtract any distance off of it. But if you were to kick it, or let's say you're kicking the ball and it goes 60 feet straight, but it goes 15 feet off to the side, that's where you would subtract the 15 feet that's outside of the lane. So you would measure from the outside of the lane to where the ball landed, and you would subtract that distance off the total distance out. So that way you're measuring, you're getting that ball would get penalized for the accuracy. So it would take off the distance.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay.
Now it does.
And Claudia, I'll talk about this too. So the virtual registration forms, as well as a couple of updates on rules, are going to be up tomorrow. We're working with marketing to get those updated on there. So there may be a couple of updates on that. Just I clarified some things based off of your message from earlier too. So,
okay. Thank you.
Play safety. All right. Does anybody have any more questions about the phasing process before? I can ask you to unmute here. ANWUE.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Jason. I'm Annette from Manitowoc.
Hi.
I guess this is the first time I am on this meeting, so I'm not really understanding everything. These phases, okay, we have opted to not do anything in the fall.
Sure.
Do we have to start at phase 1, or?
Yeah.
Or do we just go where the state is?
Nope. So no, and that's what kind of we're putting out there. So it's individualized to the agencies. We want everybody to start in phase 1, so they can understand the protocols with a smaller group first. And so if you're in that first, so phase 1, the minimum amount of time you can be in phase 1 is 2 weeks. And so that gives you a minimum of 2 practices to go through the protocols, go through the check-in process, and get a feel for it before we open it up to a group of 50. So that's why I would recommend, if you're doing an indoor sport, if you want to plan your schedule, or maybe you're starting a couple weeks earlier to get into phase 2 before you would get into like your competition part, if that's what you want to be at, that's what I would recommend doing. But you would have 2 weeks minimum in that phase 1, and after that first 2 weeks, you can petition and move to phase 2.
Okay. All right. I understand now.
Okay. Anybody else with phasing? All right. I'm trying to click between the 2 pages to see if anybody was raising their hand on that. The other part I was going to show, I'm going to share my screen to share one of the virtual forms we have that will be going up, should be going up tomorrow. And this can also help answer maybe some questions as far as some of the other forms that are required. I know we got a couple of those. So first off, I want to thank Sam for sending out the information as far as medical forms and other forms that are needed for competition. I know we got a couple of questions that spiked off of those. So I guess one thing that kind of piggyback off of what something Don said earlier, for all the sports that we're offering, we made an effort that we wanted to offer virtual events for every sport. So people who aren't comfortable going to in-person practices, whether it's because their agency isn't offering anything, or them as an individual or a family is not comfortable going to in-person practices or competition, that we had something that can participate at home, very similar to what we did for like the virtual summer games. So one of the forms that's required for participating in virtual events that comes from SOI is this virtual participation waiver. And so what we did to make it easier is that for everybody who registers, we've built it in to the form. So this is the waiver right here. So this is what the registration will look like. So this is all this information is that virtual waiver. And then you would opt in. You have to say that you would agree to these terms in order to submit your scores.
Okay.
And then when you hit next, this is for punt, pass, and kick. You would give your name, email address, agency, and then as well as competition information. So at this point, it would be your punt attempt 1, 2, 3, and you would and then when you finish this, you would submit your final. You would submit that, and that would be submitting your score. So this registration form is intended for individuals to fill it out. That's kind of the route we were going with our virtual events. So that didn't require an agency manager to track or a coach to track what scores are coming in. And it doesn't, and it also, by putting the waiver in this form, like I said, on that first page, it makes it so that agency managers or coaches don't have to track who's filled out the e-participation waiver. So really, this is a way to make it so that as agency managers or coaches, you're hands off on it. And it also makes it really easy on our end for our staff to manage as well. So that's what the virtual forms will be. Those will be on the website here shortly, and I'll stop screen share. Those will be on the website shortly for individuals to sign up for or to put scores in for virtual events. And we're making those registration deadlines the last possible week before the celebration ceremony to give people opportunity to participate. When we talked about actual competition forms, the reason why we don't have them posted on the website, our plan is, and this is kind of what we started with golf, is we're sending them out to the individuals who filled out intent to play for those sports. And the reasoning behind that is since each agency has an individual phase that they're on, it was safer for us to send it to programs that we know are participating than to everybody, than have it out there for everybody. So there may be, if there's a agency that's not participating within the protocol or something like that, they would not be able to register. So that's kind of the reason why. So if there's a sport that you're not signed up for intent to play, I would let your athletic director know that, if you said, hey, we were originally working to do punt, pass, or kick, punt, pass, and kick, and now we want to, then let your athletic director know, and they'd be able to add you onto the list. So when those forms come out, and the other reason why is because where we might max out. So right now, golf, we're heading towards an in-person event here in September. That's why the forms are already out, because the event would come up sooner. Whereas some of the other events, like you said, bocce, we're looking at more localized stuff. And then a punt, pass, and kick would not, if we had an in-person event, it wouldn't be till October 10th, I believe. And so what we're waiting to see is if we can get to the phase where we can have that event before sending out that form. But we would send you out a registration form for whatever level of competition that we're at as a maximum for the phase right now. So if it's at, so right now we would have a punt, pass, and kick form to do a competition where you would host your competition at your practice and submit scores, but you wouldn't go to an in-person event that we would be hosting. And then when we get to a point where we can host a tournament, then we would send out the new registration forms that way. So we gave our teams a deadline of September 1st to finish all the registration forms, and at that point we can send them out to people on the intent to play. But for phase 1 and 2 and 3 competitions, we would be sending those out directly to agencies based on who filled out the intent to play for those sports. Does anybody have any question about the registration process as far as that goes?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Claudia.
Okay, so we're going to start the punt, pass, kick.
Okay.
Probably within the next week or 2 weeks. But you said a registration form. So do those forms have to be sent in before September 1st?
No, that's an internal deadline for us to have the forms completed to send out to agencies. and then we'll give you additional. So I think the registration deadline for a lot of the other sports outside of golf, the registration deadline tends to fall that third week of September. So you'll have 3 weeks to complete a registration form, and then your competition deadline, the scores for your the deadline for your scores would be that second week of October. So I know for punt, passing, kick, since that's the sports resource team that I'm currently on, it is September 23rd is the registration deadline. So you'll have 3 weeks to fill out a registration form by that registration deadline. And then our process is we'll take your qualifying scores and division people, and then we give you additional 2 weeks to get scores back to us, final scores back to us. You'd do the process again, and then we would place you based on the divisions off your qualifying score.
And then the paperwork that you're going to be sending out, like the bocce assessment sheet, are they going to have a sheet like that for the punt, pass, kick, where you write down the
qualifying scores? Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. And the any of the sports, so right now it's bocce and cornhole that have the assessment tests. Those are on the last page of the rules on our return to play website. So if you look at the cornhole rules, I think the chat is on page like 4 or 5, something like that. It's the last page. It's by itself. So then you can be able to print out just that page if you want to do it that way. But then it would include full instructions and also a scorecard for that.
So Jason, with the virtual bowling registration process, and my agency isn't doing bowling this year, and Mike will still do bowling and submit scores.
So yes, and so for any of the virtual events, you can submit scores individually. And so I wanted to clarify something too that kind of came up as far as what's a virtual event and what's not a virtual event. And bowling is going to be the big one, because we did say there's an option to get scores by having individuals go out and bowl on their own. That is something that's different than the virtual events. On every single one of the rules, there is a description of what the virtual event is. And so like for bowling, they're doing something called the 10-pin challenge. And so it'll be 10 different activities that they would participate in and be able to submit that way. So that's the virtual event that we're talking about, filling out those virtual forms. If you choose to have bowlers go to a bowling alley outside of a practice with families, and that's the way you want to run your bowling programs, as a coach or an agency manager, you're still collecting scores. And we consider that an in-person event because they are going out and participating in person, rather than something that, like a virtual event is something that people can do at home or close to home. Whereas going to a bowling alley to get scores for the league would be something that would take place as we consider that as in person. So the forms that you would need for anything that's outside of the virtual events is you need to have an active medical on file and the COVID-19 release form that's out there for anybody participating in those. So Mike, if you're planning on going to a bowling alley and bowling, you would need to be part of an agency that's going to be part of the league. But there's a virtual option for you to do outside of that. And I also want to point out too that you can participate in person and virtually. It doesn't limit you from one or the other, so you can do both.
But my agency had called out bowling, so could I do the 10-pin challenge?
You can do the 10-pin challenge. Yeah, you would be able to do the 10-pin challenge virtually. If you would like to do league bowling, I would contact your athletic director, and they may be able to contact you with a program that is doing bowling near you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's
Yep.
all.
All right. Any other questions on the registration process? All right. Don, what do we have next on the agenda there? Is it virtual celebrations?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up.
I think I might have it. Yeah, virtual registration. Save the date for virtual celebration ceremonies and going forward. So I think it's Brittany and Nicole up next.
Yeah, so to kind of going off what has already been said earlier, we wanted to be able to plan something to celebrate and recognize all the athletes that are competing at any level throughout the fall. So we will be hosting virtual celebrations. So as Jason kind of mentioned before, our in-person golf event, or if you're golfing remotely, there won't be an in-person award ceremony. So we're hoping to host that virtually. And then even in addition to that, we have 2 days scheduled. It is, I believe, Wednesday, October 14th and Thursday, October 15th. And we'll have both afternoons full of activities for athletes and unified partners and families to participate in. Some of them will be health and fitness. We'll host a dance and an award ceremony and lots of fun activities. So save the date. I believe programming is going to run from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. each day. And we'll have lots of fun stuff to try to bring the spirit of our state games to each of you and your athletes in your homes. So we'll try our best to make that happen. Oh, yep, and that's in the chat. Brittany just wrote in the chat those dates, so if you didn't get those down, you can see them there. Anything else, Brittany?
I don't think so. You hit it on the head.
Yeah, and I think with that, some of the things that we're planning on doing are, well, one is like anything else during this time period, we're kind of having to recreate how we do things. And an example would be with golf, we're not going to be doing a typical award ceremony at that event. So we'll probably be mailing out the awards to the agencies that participated, so that way they can then plan their own kind of celebration. But what we'd like you to do is take pictures, record it. And so we're going to have some pre-recorded as well as some live events during the celebration week. So we're also going to ultimately hope to cap it off with a virtual athlete dance. There's been several states that have been successful with that. So I think we all know how much the athletes love to dance. And so just be looking, it's a lot more planning that's involved with that, but it should be fun for everybody. So, and then Brittany, you had another save the date I think you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so for those of you that didn't know, we were supposed to have a leadership conference this year, which actually was going to be this weekend, kind of crazy to think about. And during that, we were going to have a family health forum. So obviously that got canceled, but we still want to present this information because we find it very valuable. So we are having a virtual family health forum. I'm going to post in the chat here the dates and times. So Tuesday, September 1st at 7 p.m. will be a 1-hour Zoom show, if you will, on emotional wellness. And then the following Tuesday, September 8th at 7 p.m. For an hour will be a Zoom show on fitness at home. So the target audience is family members and caregivers, but all are welcome. The information will be beneficial for coaches and athletes and everyone. So please spread the word. Please join. There will be a registration so that we can send you the Zoom information directly. I'm actually still working on that registration, but I hope to get it done tomorrow. So I will most likely do a follow-up email for this coach's call, and so I'll include the registration on that. So just keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and I think that everybody in the world is probably getting a little fatigued with virtual things, but that's kind of the world that we live in right now. And you know, we have when this started, we tried to look for activities that we could do to keep the athletes entertained when they were at home and not being able to go out and practice. And so we've kept that up. We have noticed that the numbers have started to drop a little bit. It does take quite a bit of time and effort to do those. We don't want to stop doing them, but on the other hand, if we're only going to get 3 to 6 or 7 athletes on some of the shows, it's just not worth it. And so as coaches and agency managers, if the more you can do to kind of help plug it or to help promote or even help athletes that don't have accessibility to some of it, if some have a smartphone, they can even watch these shows on their smartphone. If it's a group home, maybe one person can get something set up on a device so that everybody in the home can watch. I will tell you, for the athletes that are here tonight, Jeff and Mike, I don't think Arise's on. Arise's already sent me a text message though. You know, we see a lot of you guys all the time, and it's great, and we want to keep doing it for you, but we got to get your fellow athletes to kind of come and increase the numbers for us. So just wanted to put in a plug there. And then Brittany, did you want to just kind of finish up with some thoughts on the schedule for these meetings?
Sure. So also, I'm sorry for my dog's bark. They're barking at something right now. So I think I mentioned it in there's one of them. I think I mentioned it in one of my emails that, well, we canceled last week, obviously. There just weren't a lot of people that have started practicing yet. And so we weren't getting a lot of questions. So we thought it was just best not to take time if we didn't need it. So we canceled. And so we're just wondering what your guys' thoughts are as far as having these weekly, or if we should go to every other week. We don't care. We want to do whatever you guys want and need. We're happy to do it either way. We don't want to waste your time, but if you have questions, we want to be here for you. So I don't know if you want to just like briefly in the chat kind of say your opinion. I should have made a poll. That would have been smart.
Everybody raise their hand.
Yeah. I've heard from most people that every other week is preferred. So feel free. Yeah, so far that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I've gotten in my emails. So I think that's probably the way we'll go. So I'll send out in my follow-up email, I'll reiterate all of this, but Don, if you're okay with me making the decision, we'll be off next week.
Yeah.
And then go every other week here on out. And if we need to change it later, if bowling season hits hard and everybody's got tons of questions, I mean, we can change it. We're flexible. But I think for now, we'll go.
If something comes up, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We're there for you. I mean, this has always been about a partnership between all of us to make sure that we can keep the athletes and the coaches safe. So, yeah, just reach out if you have questions.
Yeah, so I put the email address again in the chat. So covid@specialolympicswisconsin.org. You can send your COVID release forms, just an additional reminder to turn those in. That's for not only athletes, but also any coach or parent helper, volunteer. Everyone needs to get those filled out if they're doing any in-person activities. So you can send questions, you can send the release forms, anything to that COVID address, and someone will get back to you.
A note about the COVID forms, starting next week with my weekly updates, I'll be sending out, in addition to the athlete rosters, now we'll have COVID rosters. So to let you know which of your participants has filled those out. So to help you keep track, especially with in-person bowling coming up.
Yeah, and Rick did ask about that in the chat, but it kind of got lost with everybody answering about the time of the meeting. So I just want to reiterate, bowling registration deadline is going to be October 11th, and you do not need any qualifying scores before that. We'll just need a roster of athletes that plan to compete so that we can make sure they're eligible for everything.
All right. Sorry, people are chatting at me. Okay, well then let's unless anybody else has questions.
Just a quick clarification that came in the chat. So the COVID release form only needs to be filled out once per person, and then that'll be good for the duration of COVID, however long that is. So yeah, just one form per person. You don't need to do it per sport or anything like that. It's just a one and done type thing.
Yeah, and I will mention real quick too with that. I mean, part of it is, right, SOI, Special Olympics Inc., sent that where they told us we had to use that. So part of it is from a lawyer perspective of liability, but really when you look through it, and if you haven't had a chance to watch the video on the website with the athletes going through it, it really is supposed to be partly educational as well. And so helping the athletes understand about the risks, helping them understand about the need to wear face coverings and stand 6 feet apart and have their own water bottle. So, I would say part of it is, yeah, we need to have it signed and we need to have it, but also remember, it isn't just a checkoff box. It is really a point to kind of be able to help educate the athletes. So anything else? All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We will, Zachary Reese didn't know about water bottles. Well, Zachary, then whoever went over your COVID form with you didn't go over it very well. We'll talk to you about that later. Thanks everybody. And we'll see everybody in a couple weeks. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have questions in between now and then. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.